The first red flag wasn't even red, it was beige. Beige folder. Beige kitchen. Beige words from a woman I'd just married 24 hours earlier, standing barefoot on our overpriced imported tile, stirring hazelnut creamer into her coffee like nothing was wrong. Then she dropped the folder in front of me. New rules, she said, smiling like a hostess showing off a guest manual at an Airbnb. This is how it's going to be. I didn't answer right away. I looked at her, noticed how her tone didn't quite match the casual robe or the steam curling up from her cup. I didn't even touch the folder at first. I just studied the shape of her mouth when she said it, like it gave her a little thrill, like she'd been waiting for the ceremony to be over so she could start whatever this was. I flipped it open. Rule 1. No visits to your family without notice or discussion. I need emotional safety and stability. Rule 2. Finances will be centralized through me for efficiency and mental load sharing. Rule 3. Physical intimacy will be discussed weekly. Separate bedrooms will be implemented during hormonal or emotional cycles. Rule 4. You acknowledge me as head of household in writing to prevent future disagreements. This is not a power grab, it's a boundary. There were 11 rules total. Some written like legal bylaws. Some written like the passive-aggressive demands of someone who reads too many self-help memes. Not one of them included a question. Not one assumed I had any say. She stood there, watching me read, sipping that creamer-drenched coffee like she was waiting for applause. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't say, "Are you serious?" like some wounded sitcom husband. I just closed the folder slowly and looked up at her. "Okay," I said. She tilted her head. "Okay. I'll go pick up dry cleaning. Be back in a bit. Can you also grab oat milk?" she asked. I nodded, smiling like a man who still lived here. Like a man who hadn't just been handed a loaded gun by someone who thought it was a joke. I walked out and didn't get the dry cleaning. I didn't even have anything at the cleaners. What I did have, stored in a weathered fireproof box in my old car trunk, was the original copy of our prenup. Not the version she'd half-read before the wedding and laughed off because we love each other. The real version. The one with the addendum she never noticed. The one her father signed off on when he funded the down payment on our starter home. A gesture of faith, he'd called it. I also had the marriage certificate, still warm from the county clerk's stamp, and the file from the title company, complete with the wire record for the $380,000 marital gift he contributed to the house. A gift contingent, as the footnote put it, on the continuance of the marital union in good faith and mutual trust for a period no less than 12 months. 12 months. And here we were, 24 hours in, with her demanding to be acknowledged as head of household and limiting family contact like a middle manager drawing up weekend shift schedules. I sat in the parking lot of a gas station, pulled out the papers, and reread them. I remembered the old attorney who drew them up for me, how he'd underlined that clause 3 times and said, "If she ever tries to leverage the marriage for control, this is your eject button. Silent, legal, and final." I never thought I'd use it. I never thought I'd need to. But there it was. All she had to do was prove her arrogance with something tangible, something written, something that changed the emotional terms of the marriage in writing. And she had. She'd done it with a beige folder and a line that still echoed in my head. This is how it's going to be. I didn't feel heartbreak. I didn't feel rage. I felt quiet. Quiet like the kind that comes just before a switch flips. She thought she'd won. She thought the power had transferred with the ring. What she didn't know, what she didn't even consider, was that I never played power games out loud. Not once. I let people talk. I let them boast. I let them make the first move. Because that's all I needed. One documented, traceable move. And she had just handed me 11. Signed and dated. When I walked back in later that afternoon, she barely looked up from her laptop. "You forgot the oat milk. I'll get it next time." She didn't even notice I was carrying the folder again. The same one, only now padded with a fresh set of certified copies. I slid it quietly into the desk drawer in the hallway. "By the way," she called out from the kitchen, "we need to talk about the garage. I'm thinking it should be my art space." I nodded, flipping the hallway light off behind me. "Sure. We'll figure it out." She thought I sounded agreeable. What she didn't realize, that garage was already the legal address of my holding company, and her father's gift was already on its way to becoming a demand. The elevator ride to the 12th floor was slow, almost theatrical, the kind that gives you time to second-guess everything you're about to do. I didn't. The office smelled the same way it had 3 months ago, polished oak, lemon-scented disinfectant, and old money pretending to be new. The receptionist glanced up at me like I was a ghost. "Mr. Ayers," she said with a forced smile. "Didn't expect to see you again so soon." Didn't expect to need to, I replied. She paged Martin Heller, the trust manager who'd handled the paperwork for our home. I remembered him clearly, buttoned shirt too tight at the neck, navy tie with microscopic anchors, and a habit of tapping his pen against his clipboard like a man who hated pauses. He came out of his office with that same tight-lipped efficiency. You bring the documents? I handed him the manila folder. Marriage certificate, signed prenuptial agreement, title transfer forms, and, the kicker, her list of rules, complete with her handwriting, signature, and date in the top right corner. Heller flipped through them one by one, his eyes darting back and forth like a scanner in a courtroom. When he hit page 3, Rule 4, you acknowledge me as head of household, he stopped tapping the pen. This is new, he said. She gave it to me the morning after our wedding. He nodded slowly, his thumb brushing across the embossed letterhead of the prenup like he was dusting off a memory. You know what this means, don't you? He asked. I just stared at him. This voids the good faith clause. Hell, it vaporizes it. I leaned back. Then let's vaporize the gift. Heller gave a small whistle. Most people don't read the footnotes. I paid extra to write them. He smiled, for the first time in years, probably. A real one. Not the courtroom kind. Not the UVE just inherited grandma's farm kind. But a genuine grin. Small, sharp, and impressed. I'll draft the memo, he said. Her father won't see it coming. That was putting it lightly. Because her father, George Whitmore, was the type of man who didn't believe in consequences. He believed in leverage, in control, in intimidation softened by country club etiquette. He strutted through life like a man who'd never lost a negotiation, because even when he technically did, the lawyers would iron it flat by the weekend. He called it a marital gift. That $380,000 wired from his business account to the title company on a Thursday morning 6 weeks before our wedding. He made sure I saw the email. Consider it a vote of confidence in your commitment to my daughter. The phrasing was deliberate, and so was my response. Then let's make it mutual. Let's tie it to the marriage. So we did. Clause 3C. Should either party violate the spirit of the union through acts of misrepresentation, coercion, or emotional fraud within the first 12 months, all gifts tied to property ownership revert to repayable status. No arbitration. No delay. It was an elegant clause. Too elegant for my now wife to notice. And far too obscure for a man like George Whitmore to imagine being used against him. But she'd done it. The moment she slid that folder across the table and said, "This is how it's going to be," she lit the match. Because marriage wasn't a game of romance in our world. It was a contract with real consequences. And coercion? That was the nuclear trigger. Heller pulled out a worn leather-bound ledger from a locked drawer and opened to the page marked Whitmore Transfer. The wire record was there. Amount, date, sender, purpose. He slid it toward me. I'll mark it as convertible. To a loan. I asked. To a demand note. 30 days. And the house. Title reverts to the original buyer. No co-signature required, since her interest was conditional. We didn't toast. We didn't shake hands. We didn't say, let's get them. This wasn't a vendetta. It was math. She'd changed the rules. I just filed the results. Before I left, Heller looked up at me with a kind of puzzled admiration. Why didn't you say something the moment she gave you that list? I zipped the folder shut. Because she thought I wouldn't. He nodded. That's the thing about these types. They never expect silence to be a move. And it had been. Silence gave her rope. Silence gave her comfort. Silence gave her confidence. And then silence weaponized all of it. I walked back out to the elevator. Pressed the button. No music. No fanfare. Just the quiet hum of machinery preparing to lower me 12 floors down. Back into the world where she still thought she'd won. Where she still thought the house was hers. The marriage was secure. The money was free. And her father? Still sipping overpriced wine with his advisors, blind to the fact that his bank was now the one under siege. Because it wasn't just a gift. Not anymore. It was a debt. And I had just called it due. She thought I was adjusting. She thought the silence meant surrender. That the absence of pushback was acceptance. And to be fair, most men would have done exactly that. They'd nod through the patronizing tone, laugh off the digs about retraining, and pray things would eventually settle into something resembling normal. But I'm not most men. And I wasn't praying. I was recording. The first time she said it, "I'm retraining him," was at dinner with her college friends. We'd gone to some overpriced Mediterranean place where the tablecloths looked like IKEA napkins and the cocktails came with edible flowers. She clinked glasses with her sorority sister from back east and announced, loud enough for the next table to hear, Week 1 of marriage, and I already have him doing the dishes and folding towels the right way. Slow clap for retraining husbands, please. The table laughed. I smiled. I even raised my glass. What she didn't know was that I'd left my phone recording in my jacket pocket. Not because I needed proof she was mean, but because her tone was evolving, from playful to possessive, from sarcastic to strategic. And the more she felt in control, the more she verbalized it. She started texting me lists of chores by bullet point. Since you're home early, please complete these before I get back, red heart, followed by timestamps. Dishwasher, vacuum hallway, move my car to the curb, fold blankets, refill Brita. Always with a heart emoji. Always like it was a reward. I printed them out. She started saying my house instead of our house. Subtle at first, then blatant. Can you take your shoes off? I just had my floors polished. Or, don't leave clutter in my guest bathroom. I screenshotted those too. Sorted by date, tone, and content. The guest bathroom, by the way, I paid for it in full. Renovation. Fixtures. Custom tiling. She chose the scent diffuser and the towels. That was her contribution. Then came the recordings. She'd take her calls on speaker, walking around like a TED Talk was always on standby. I didn't need to sneak. She didn't filter herself. That's what power does. It makes people loud. One day, she was pacing the living room, phone in one hand, wine glass in the other, laughing with her best friend Kim. He thinks being calm makes him smart, she said, between sips. But I run this house. I run him. His family's got zero backbone. He married up. He just doesn't know it yet. Kim cackled. God, I love you. Oh, honey, she added. He's like a rescue dog. A little skittish at first, but if you're firm, they adapt. That one went into the video archive. External mic, clean audio. Timestamped. Then there were the receipts. Not the literal kind, though I had those too, but behavioral ones. I started journaling, line by line, what she said, how she said it, context, emotional tone. I matched it with bank statements and text logs. Like the time she told me we were co-managing finances, then withdrew $7,200 from our joint honeymoon savings to surprise her sister with a girls' trip. I wasn't even told. Just found out via the banking app. She said, you wouldn't understand. It's emotional support. I replied, sure. Makes sense. Then logged it. Transaction ID, date, quote. The folder started as a manila envelope, grew into a binder, eventually became a secure digital archive with scanned documents, recordings, and transcripts, all organized by topic: financial coercion, social demeaning, behavioral manipulation. The funny part? She thought I was becoming more obedient. You're so much easier to live with now, she purred one night, curling up beside me for the first time in a week. See? We're finding our rhythm. I kissed her on the forehead. Told you I'm a fast learner. She giggled and fell asleep against my chest. What she didn't know was that I had already tagged that night's calendar event as Manipulative Intimacy Reset, recorded. Because I was done being the student. I was building the syllabus. Each insult, each smug declaration, each moment she forgot I had eyes, was a puzzle piece. And I wasn't rushing it. I let her keep talking, keep tightening her grip. Because that's what happens when people think you're broken. They stop hiding the leash. And I had no intention of breaking. I had every intention of documenting, of building a paper trail so clean, so damning, so surgically assembled, that when the moment came, it wouldn't just be believable, it would be inevitable. She'd written the list. I was just writing the ending. It was a Tuesday when I made the call. Not a dramatic day, not a breaking point. She was at her yoga class, probably bragging to someone about how she'd finally gotten me to eat gluten-free. I was alone in my car, parked outside a hardware store. Not buying anything, just thinking. Staring at a sign advertising winter mulch, watching shoppers go in and out, and feeling the quiet, subtle shift of a decision hardening. Then I dialed. Redwood and Darnell, this is Linda. I need to speak with Gary Redwood, I said. May I ask what this is in regards to? It's about a marriage. Mine. There was a pause, then a tone shift. Please hold. Gary Redwood was not a cheap man. He didn't advertise, didn't do billboards or awkward Facebook videos in front of law books. He had one specialty: untying bad knots, legally and cleanly, without a single thread left in the other person's hand. His clients were quiet people. CEOs, trust fund heirs, engineers with airtight prenups, people who had too much to lose for a messy divorce. People like me. He picked up on the third ring. His voice was gravel and steel wool. You waited, he said. Smart. Tell me everything. So I did. I told him about the beige folder, the 11 rules, the head of household line, her tone, Her laughter. The way she'd turned the honeymoon period into a soft coup. He didn't interrupt, except once. Did she date it? Yes. And you still have the original? Yes. Plus scans. Continue. I laid it all out. The recordings. The receipts. The property clause. The conditions of the gift from her father. I even quoted the part of the prenup where she agreed, in writing, that any attempt to shift marital power through coercion or misrepresentation within the first year would constitute grounds for annulment with asset reversal. When I finished, there was silence on the line. Then, a slow exhale. She got greedy, Redwood said. They always do. They mistake silence for surrender. And her father? If this goes through, he said, he'll owe himself. In full. No legal tricks, no tax shelters. The trust company will treat the gift as a misappropriated marital asset, which means it gets reclassified as a loan that must be repaid. He paused. And the house. Title reverts to the original buyer. You. She'll be out before she realizes she was never on the deed to begin with. Not really. I could hear him smiling. You're sure about this? I asked. I'm not a therapist, son, but I know a trap when I see one. And you didn't walk into this one. You documented it. That list alone is enough to blow the whole thing open. The rest? Just gasoline on the fire. We scheduled a face-to-face. Quietly. No email. No trace. We met in his office 2 days later, just after dusk. It was the kind of place with soundproof walls and no windows facing the street. Old school. Trusted. He laid out the plan like a general preparing for siege. Step 1. File for annulment citing breach of implied good faith. Step 2. Notify the trust company of Clause 3C activation. Step 3. Move financial separation forward under Section 8 of the prenup, your prenup. Not joint. She doesn't get a discovery phase. She doesn't get a war. And her father? Gets a certified repayment notice. Dated. Final. He'll try to scream. Threaten. Maybe even lawyer up. But he signed the documents himself. With his estate attorney as witness. There's no exit hatch. He slid the papers toward me. Sign here. We'll keep this quiet for now. She won't know until the process is already rolling. You'll live like normal. Smile. Nod. Let her think the leash is still on. I signed. The pen felt heavier than usual. Not dramatic. Just solid. Like a line being drawn in wet cement. As I left, Redwood called out one last thing. She's going to think this came out of nowhere. I turned. Let her. Driving home, I passed her car parked in front of the house. She was inside already. Probably lighting a candle, queuing up her mindfulness podcast. She always liked to meditate before demanding something passive-aggressive. I walked in like nothing had changed. She looked up from her couch and grinned. Can you bring me some water? Of course, I said, already in the kitchen. To her, I was being cooperative. To me, I was documenting another interaction. Because the legal mechanism was engaged. Like a bomb under the floorboards, counting down with every smug little command. And when it went off, there would be no fire. Just silence. And a notarized void where her control used to be. Wednesday started like most others. I made her a smoothie, peanut butter, almond milk, 2 scoops of her expensive collagen powder she insisted we keep in a locked cabinet. She was getting ready for her ladies in leadership brunch. That's what she called it. A bunch of 30-something women who treated networking like foreplay and quoted TED Talks like scripture. They all hated their husbands, most of them secretly, and bragged about how in charge they were at home. My wife. She was their queen. She floated around the kitchen barefoot, dictating the playlist for the afternoon while I chopped strawberries like a good little domestic accessory. You remembered the oat milk this time, she said smug. I'm getting better, I replied. She grinned. Retraining takes time. Sure does. I handed her the tray and watched her walk outside to the patio, humming to herself. She didn't notice the unmarked sedan that pulled up across the street 10 minutes later. Didn't notice the man in the tailored navy suit step out, holding a thick envelope. Didn't see him walk to our front door while she and her friends giggled over mimosas and avocado toast. I opened the door. Mr. Ayers, I nodded. Please confirm this is the correct address. It is. Service confirmed, he said, then walked away like it was any other Wednesday. I slid the envelope onto the marble kitchen island and went upstairs, not saying a word. 20 minutes later, I heard it. A sudden stop in the laughter. Forks pausing midair. A strange silence hanging over the patio like a power outage had just hit the brunch. She must have seen the envelope sitting there, cream-colored and ominous, with her full legal name typed in bold across the front. It's a curious thing to watch arrogance collapse in real time. I stood at the top of the stairs as she came in, envelope in hand, already half open, her face shifting through confusion, irritation, and then something harder to define. She read the cover sheet, then the motion, then the attached clause from the prenup, then the activation letter from the trust company, stamped and initialed. And just like that, the wine left her cheeks. She didn't scream. She didn't throw anything. She didn't even blink. She just turned around and walked. No, marched into the bedroom and shut the door. I stayed upstairs. Listened. The phone rang. Her father. No answer. Then again. And again. She finally left a voicemail. Dad, it's happening. I think he filed something. I don't understand. Where did this come from? Please call me. The words filed something were telling. Even in that moment, she couldn't admit what it was. Annulment. Breach of good faith. Reversion of assets. Immediate liability. She opened the bedroom door and stared at me. You blindsided me. I followed the contract, I said calmly. You remember, the one we both signed? You're ending this? Just like that. No, you ended it. I'm just filing the paperwork. This is about the list? Her voice was high now, thinned out with panic. It was a joke. Then you should have put a punchline at the bottom. I walked past her and went downstairs. Her friends were still on the patio, pretending not to eavesdrop, while visibly frozen in mid-sip. She followed. Don't you dare make this public. My father isn't answering your calls. I could see it hit her. That tiny click behind the eyes. That realization that something bigger was happening. Not just a husband walking away. Not just a marital spat. But something calculated. A dismantling. She turned toward her friends and forced a smile. Just a little misunderstanding, she chirped, holding up the envelope like it was a party game. Legal stuff. You know how it is when men get emotional. They laughed, a little too loudly. One of them offered her more champagne. Another one made a joke about prenups and beta revenge. But I watched their eyes. They weren't laughing with her. They were scanning the envelope, doing the math, wondering if their own husbands might someday do the same. I stepped into the kitchen, grabbed my keys, and walked out the front door. No shouting. No final word. Just the smooth click of a door closing on the most performative brunch in suburban history. By the time I reached the corner, I got the alert on my phone. The trust company had emailed the first formal notice of repayment. It had gone to her father's primary business account, flagged as urgent. She thought she'd be making toast to herself all afternoon. But the real party had already started. It was just happening in court. I didn't go home that night. I checked into a boutique hotel downtown. Not the kind with a spa or skyline view, just clean sheets, a bolted door, and no pastel throw pillows embroidered with words like blessed or together. The room smelled like nothing, a rare and underrated luxury. The front desk clerk asked if I needed anything else. I said, silence, and he nodded like he understood. An hour later, a secure envelope was delivered to my room. Hand-delivered. No email. No PDF. Just paper. Dense, formal, and legally irreversible. Inside was the confirmation from the trust company. Notice of reclassification, signed and stamped. George Whitmore, my charming father-in-law, was now liable for the $380,000 gift he wired into our escrow account. Per Clause 3C, due to annulment based on documented coercion and misrepresentation, the gift had been deemed a conditional asset, which meant it had never truly transferred, which meant it now existed in limbo until repaid in full, with interest calculated from the date of the wedding. The deadline? 30 days. I stared at the document for a long time. Not out of hesitation, just appreciation. It was rare to see leverage printed so cleanly. No emotion. No loopholes. Just math with the weight of a hammer. Then came the text. 9:12 p.m. Her. We need to talk. Please come home. I didn't reply. 9:27 p.m. Her. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for things to get this far. 9:31 p.m. Her. Are you really doing this? Over a list. 9:35 p.m. Her. My dad is furious. Please just talk to me. I let the screen dim. Waited another 10 minutes. Then finally responded. 9:46 p.m. Me. Check with your lawyer first. And that was it. No explanation. No accusations. No performative morality. I wasn't interested in playing the how could you game. She knew what she did. She just didn't expect it to matter. The silence on her end was louder than all her texts combined. By 10:30, I knew she had reached someone. The message indicators stopped. The storm passed. Or more accurately, it went internal. Into strategy mode. She would start calculating now, mapping out what she thought were options. But none of them would lead anywhere she liked. Because she didn't understand what she'd triggered. She thought annulment was a humiliation, a moral failure, something that could be walked back if she apologized hard enough. She thought the rules were emotional, negotiable. What she didn't know was that the contract didn't care about feelings. It didn't care if the brunch group sympathized. It didn't care how hurt she was. It cared about facts. Fact. She handed me a written list of demands one day after signing a marriage agreement that explicitly forbade coercion. Fact. Her father funded the down payment on our house as a marital gift, conditioned on good faith continuation. Fact. She breached both. In writing, on video, on record. There wasn't a lever she could pull that would make that go away. I laid back on the hotel bed and stared at the ceiling, listening to the faint buzz of the air conditioning. I thought about the dinner we were supposed to have that night. She'd made a reservation, a fancy place with candlelight and overpriced scallops. It was supposed to be our midweek connection night, something she'd written into our marriage calendar with color-coded blocks. One of the few rules I didn't argue with. She'd be sitting there now, maybe still waiting, maybe not. Maybe still clinging to the belief that I'd come walking in, sheepish and conciliatory, saying we'd gone too far, that I didn't want to blow everything up. But I did. Not out of spite. Not out of anger. Out of precision. She handed me a match and poured the gasoline herself. All I did was light it quietly and leave the door unlocked so she could watch it burn. Outside the hotel window, the city glowed. People moved on sidewalks, laughing into phones, ducking into bars. The world kept turning. Back at the house, she was realizing something she'd never considered before. That control isn't the same as security. And that love, once manipulated, doesn't owe you a soft landing. I slept well that night. No podcasts. No candle diffusers. No chore lists waiting by the sink. Just me, a signed document, and the realization that sometimes silence is the loudest answer you can give. She finally got through to her father late the next morning. According to the trust company logs, which I now had access to, thanks to my designation as a conditional beneficiary, George Whitmore opened the certified email at 10:03 a.m. and placed his first call to her at 10:06. The tone? I could only imagine. But I pictured her holding the phone at arm's length while pacing barefoot through our now very temporarily shared kitchen, whispering things like, "I didn't know," and "It was just a form," and "Why are you yelling at me?" They scheduled an emergency meeting with Thomas Claiborne, their family's longtime estate lawyer. Claiborne was the type of man who wore gold-framed reading glasses, carried a leather-bound planner, and spoke in half-sentences that made you feel like the problem was you, not the law. They met in George's office downtown, the one with the dark wood walls and a vintage globe nobody ever spun. She showed up in oversized sunglasses and a tight gray dress, looking like a woman trying to project control she didn't have. George looked like a man who hadn't slept. Rumor was he'd been yelling at his CFO all morning, demanding to know how no one had flagged this clause earlier. Because that's the thing about arrogance, it doesn't like being audited. Claiborne opened the packet and began flipping through it methodically. Marriage certificate, prenuptial agreement, annotated addendum, clause 3C, the trust memo, the filing confirmation. Then, her list, handwritten, signed, dated, photocopied 3 ways, attached with a formal annotation. Exhibit C, behavioral demands constituting coercion. Claiborne's pen froze mid-scratch. This clause is enforceable, he said, adjusting his glasses. He filed everything correctly. I've reviewed this exact boilerplate language in other instruments. It's valid. George stared at him like he'd spoken Mandarin. You're saying we owe him? No. Claiborne interrupted, firm now. You owe yourself. The money never left your books cleanly. The moment she breached the clause, it reverted to a conditional liability. You signed off on that structure when we built the trust's real estate conduit. He triggered it? Claiborne nodded. 30-day demand note. Dated from filing. And since it's routed through a family holding structure, it bypasses standard arbitration. The asset protection layers you have in place can't block this. The house title's already flagged for reversion. If you attempt to stall, he can freeze the property sale and apply for enforcement damages. George slammed his palm against the desk. $400,000, right now? It's closer to $412,000 with accrued filing fees and valuation adjustments. Claiborne corrected quietly. She stared at them both, stunned. You can fix this, she said to the lawyer, reaching for the folder. There has to be a way. There is no way, Claiborne replied. He has the advantage. You breached in writing. He responded within legal bounds. This isn't a messy divorce. This is a surgical annulment, and frankly, one of the most disciplined filings I've ever seen. George turned toward her, jaw clenched. What the hell did you do? It was just a list, she snapped. I wasn't trying to hurt him. It was meant to be funny. A joke. You signed it, Claiborne said. You dated it. You weaponized it. I didn't mean. It doesn't matter what you meant. George stood, walked to the window, and gripped the sill with both hands like the view might offer a solution. It didn't. You understand what this does to the books? He muttered. I'm leveraged on the Naples property. That loan was contingent on this house staying clean. If I pull liquidity to cover this note, I trigger a penalty clause with the private bank. That's not my fault, she said defensively. No. He turned back to her, his voice now low and lethal. You wrote 11 rules. Told him when he could visit his own mother. Demanded separate bedrooms. And now, you're going to sit here and say it's not your fault. Claiborne closed the folder with a soft snap. You both underestimated him, he said. That's the real problem. You assumed silence meant submission. George looked like he'd swallowed battery acid. Can we settle? You can try, Claiborne said. But I doubt he wants that. She folded her arms. Why not? Because this wasn't about money. If it were, he'd have gone for alimony or damages. This, he tapped the file, was about control. And he just took it back. They sat in silence for a long time. No one said what they were all thinking. That she'd turned the marriage into a performance, and he had turned her performance into evidence. Now the walls were closing in, not because of spite, but because of structure. The kind her father once praised. The kind she thought didn't apply to her. And for the first time since the wedding, the three of them realized something terrifying. She didn't marry a quiet man. She married a patient one. And he wasn't done. She came home ready for war. The ride from her father's office had been quiet, tight-jawed, hands clenched around the steering wheel like she could choke control back into her life. She didn't speak to George on the way out. He hadn't looked at her. And when she finally broke the silence in the parking lot, "We'll fix it," he just got into his car and drove away. No hug, no plan, just exhaust fumes and a locked phone screen. So when she pulled into the driveway, she slammed the gear into park and marched to the front door with her purse swinging like a weapon. She'd imagined how it would go. Demand answers, shift blame, find some way to shame me back into conversation. Maybe cry, maybe seduce. She had a whole arsenal, sharpened and tested. She stepped inside. The house was quiet. Too quiet. The scent diffuser she insisted on, bergamot and amber, because it reset the nervous system, was still running in the hallway, which made the stillness even louder. Daniel, she called. No answer. She walked through the living room, intact. Kitchen, spotless. Even the dishes in the drying rack were arranged by size, which irritated her. She always said I stacked them like an accountant, not a husband. Then she turned toward the bedroom. It took her exactly 3 seconds to realize what was wrong. The closet door was open. His side was empty. The suits, gone. The ties, folded pocket squares, leather dress, shoes polished to military shine, vanished. The drawer where he kept his cufflinks was pulled out and left askew, as if it had been opened deliberately, but without haste. She rushed to the safe. Open. Cleaned out. No documents. No files. No passport. She didn't scream, not immediately. She froze, like a chess player realizing they were in checkmate and hadn't seen it coming. Then she turned. It was sitting there on the kitchen table, the beige folder, the one she had filled with her list of new rules that first morning, smiling over her oat milk latte like she was the protagonist in some romantic comedy about taking charge. She walked toward it slowly, as if it might explode. The top page was flipped open. Rule 4 was underlined in red pen. You acknowledge me as head of household. And directly beneath it, scrawled in black ink, her own handwriting, casual and decisive. This is how it's going to be. Next to it, a single post-it note. Yellow. Centered. Agreed. Annulled. That's when it hit her. Not all at once. Not like a movie where someone drops to their knees. No, it was quieter than that. It was a hollowing. Like someone had reached inside her and started gently pulling wires out. She walked backward, sat down in the kitchen chair, his chair, and stared at the list like it was a ransom note from a version of herself she didn't recognize anymore. Because she hadn't just tried to take control. She had documented it, signed it, gift-wrapped it, and handed it to someone who understood contracts better than she understood control. She thought the list had been power. She thought the rules made her safe. But now the bedroom was empty. The power was gone. And the rules? They weren't rules at all. They were evidence. Outside, a bird chirped on the windowsill. A lawnmower buzzed in the distance. The world didn't care that she'd just been legally and emotionally evicted. She grabbed her phone and opened our messages. Scrolled up. Back through weeks of her barking orders in emoji-wrapped texts. Back through the passive-aggressive comments. The unacknowledged sweetness he used to send, picked up your dry cleaning, made your tea, left it by your laptop. She'd never replied to those. Not once. Now she typed, "Please come back. I didn't mean it." She stared at it, then deleted it, then typed again, "I'll change. I swear. We can start over. Please." Then deleted that, too. Because suddenly, she understood something she never saw in all her workshops and empowerment brunches. You don't negotiate with someone who already signed the exit clause. You don't win against a man who waited until he had every receipt in order before walking out without a sound. And you definitely don't rewrite the rules once he's proven he read the fine print first. The bedroom was empty. But the silence? That was full of meaning. 3 days later, her name disappeared from the deed. It was done quietly, efficiently. No lawyers shouting in courtrooms, no dramatic courtroom gasps, just a quiet filing at the county registrar's office downtown. The new title listed me as the sole property owner. No co-signature required. Her name had never technically been part of the deed, only noted as a residing spouse under the marital trust structure, one that no longer existed. The document that finalized it was just 4 pages long, but it hit like a wrecking ball. The registrar clerk didn't blink. He'd seen 1,000 property transfers. One more meant nothing. But to her, it meant everything. Because when she got the notification, certified mail, signature required, it wasn't addressed to us. It was addressed to me. Alone. That was the first domino. The second fell that same afternoon, when her favorite brunch friend, Aubrey, the blonde with the curated Instagram marriage and the surgically enhanced virtue signaling, texted her. "Are you okay? We heard about the deed. We're all a little confused." Not angry, not supportive, just confused. And with that single message, the brunch group, the curated circle of suburban royalty, fractured. Within 48 hours, she was uninvited from a wine tasting. The group chat went silent. And someone, probably Rachel or Dana, they always had loose lips when Rose was involved, started whispering the real story, that she'd been served annulment papers while hosting brunch, that her husband walked out with everything and left her with a post-it. And worse, that it had all been legal. That word, legal, spread like blood in a shark tank. Suddenly, her empire of curated power moves and passive-aggressive flexes was nothing more than a very public cautionary tale. Not empowered woman, but woman who underestimated the quiet guy. Meanwhile, her father was unraveling. The repayment demand from the trust wasn't optional. The clause was airtight. His estate manager had already missed the first appeal window. Now the repayment clock was ticking loudly. George Whitmore began dumping assets. First, it was the smaller stuff. Shares in a mid-tier logistics firm, a half-finished investment in a health food app. Then, 2% of his long-standing equity in a private real estate REIT he'd sat on for a decade. All to cover a single marital gift he once waved off like a tip to a valet. I had eyes on it all. Public filings, SEC disclosures, a few helpful alerts set up years ago when I realized George liked to move big money quietly. I watched the sell-offs cascade, not with joy, but with precision. Because every asset he dumped was another receipt. And every receipt made it clear, this wasn't a feud. It was a reckoning. She called me once, just once, after the deed was transferred. I didn't pick up. Let it go to voicemail. Her voice was brittle, like someone trying to speak through cracked glass. "Daniel, I saw the papers. You filed the title change. How could you do this? We were married. You didn't have to go this far. We could have talked. You didn't even give me a chance to apologize." There was a pause, a breath. "Please, just tell me what you want." I deleted the message. Because she already knew what I wanted. I wanted out. Cleanly. Legally. Quietly. I wanted her to understand. That marriage is not a theater for domination. That head of household is not a crown to be demanded. It's a role to be earned. And most of all, that you don't hand a man a contract of demands and expect him not to read the fine print. By the end of the week, she was staying with her sister. The house, my house, was being prepped for sale. I'd never planned to stay in it. Too many memories already etched into the walls. I wanted it sold, cleanly, for market value. Every dollar would go into a new account. A new name. A new place. The neighbors had started asking questions. One even rang the doorbell to check in, feigning concern with a plastic smile. "Is everything all right? We just noticed she hasn't been around." And someone said, "I filed an annulment," I said flatly. "She breached the prenup. I executed the clause." His face twitched. "Oh, wow. I didn't know that was even a thing." "It is," I said, "if you plan ahead." He nodded and left without another word. That night, I watched the porch lights of the surrounding homes flick on, one by one, like little warning signals flashing to the rest of the neighborhood. Don't mistake quiet for weakness. And don't ever assume the man who smiles through your demands isn't building his own list, one clause at a time. It happened on a Thursday night, just after 11 p.m. The only reason I know the time is because the neighbor across the street, Mrs. Callahan, retired school principal and neighborhood surveillance system, logged it in her little notebook. She keeps track of things like that. Porch lights left on too long, trash cans not brought in by sunset, and, on this particular night, an eruption of shouting from the Whitmore girls' house that shattered the silence of their otherwise well-manicured street. George Whitmore didn't knock. He didn't call ahead. He pulled up in a black Range Rover, still wearing a suit that looked wrinkled for the first time in decades. He didn't even shut the car door properly. He just left it open, headlights casting crooked shadows across the lawn as he stormed up the path. She opened the door in pajama pants and a sweatshirt that used to be mine. That part made me smile when I heard about it. He didn't wait. "You absolute fool," he barked, voice ricocheting off the siding. "Do you even understand what you've done?" Mrs. Callahan, allegedly watering her hydrangeas at 11 o'clock at night, froze mid-hose as the words carried across the cul-de-sac. "Do you realize," George shouted again, "what you've cost this family?" She tried to pull him inside, told him to lower his voice, but he wasn't performing anymore. He wasn't protecting the brand. His hands were shaking, one clutching a folder, the other waving like it could slap reality into her. "I just got off the phone with our estate auditors," he hissed. "Do you know what they said? They said we're exposed. Because of you. Because of your list. Your little rules." She backed away, stammering. "It was supposed to be funny. It was just a joke. I didn't mean." "You didn't mean? You didn't mean?" He slammed the folder down on her kitchen table, hard enough to make the vase rattle. "You signed it. You dated it. You announced to your friends that you were running him. And now? Now the house is gone. The money's gone. And I'm being investigated for fraudulent transfer because of your ego." She cried. She actually cried. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," she said, barely audible. "He was supposed to need me. I was supposed to be the one in control." "You were supposed to what?" he said, almost laughing. "You married a man who was more patient than you were clever. That's your mistake." She tried again, softer, as if volume could erase consequence. "It was just a list." But it wasn't, because that list was a document, a contract, a written declaration of control that violated the very core of our marriage agreement. It wasn't satire. It wasn't cute. It was Exhibit A. The neighbor said he left a few minutes later, slamming the door behind him so hard it knocked one of her framed photos off the wall. She sat there for hours, alone, staring at a house that wasn't hers, with a name she no longer shared. No brunch invites, no girls group, no title, no property, and no leverage. Just the list. The same list I'd underlined before I walked out. The same list that took less than 2 weeks to unravel the illusion she'd tried to build around me. She thought I was quiet because I was soft. She thought silence meant surrender. But the truth is, I never needed to shout, never needed to threaten, because I had a better weapon. Clarity. I read the contract, and then I followed it, line by line, clause by clause, until I walked away with everything, and left her exactly what she demanded. Her rules. Written, signed, enforced.